The grade that broke me. They say school teaches you about life, but no one ever tells you that sometimes, life teaches you through the people who try to break you. My name is Ava Monroe, and I learned that the hard way. It started on a gray November morning in Cedar Valley High, a small-town school in Oregon where dreams often stayed dreams. The hallways smelled of chalk dust and burnt coffee. The air was thick with whispers of college acceptances, except for mine. I was supposed to be top of my class. I was top of my class. Until one person decided I didn't deserve to be. Her name was Mrs. Langford, my English teacher. The woman everyone adored. Elegant, composed, the kind of teacher who made you believe she cared. But I learned something she didn't want anyone to know. And from that moment on, she decided to destroy me. It began with small things, lowering my essay grades, questioning my participation, pretending my assignments were missing. I thought it was a mistake. I believed teachers didn't do that. But when final grades came out, I saw the truth staring back at me, an F. The only F I had ever received. That single letter shattered everything. My scholarship offer disappeared. My college admission froze. And my parents, who had worked double shifts just to afford my prep classes, looked at me with disappointment heavy enough to crush my chest. I tried to explain. I begged them to believe me, that something wasn't right. But all they saw was a failure. And maybe, in that moment, that's what I became. Nights turned into weeks of sleepless silence. I kept replaying her face in my mind, the soft smile she gave me when she handed back my failed essay. Like she wanted me to feel it. Like it gave her satisfaction. Then one afternoon, as I sat alone in the library surrounded by the ghosts of the future I'd lost, I overheard her voice. Calm. Confident. Cruel. She was talking to another teacher, bragging, almost laughing, about teaching a certain student humility. That was the moment my grief burned into purpose. It wasn't a mistake. It was personal. And for the first time in my life, I stopped crying. Something inside me shifted, a quiet storm forming under my ribs. I didn't know how I'd fight back, or what it would cost me. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. If Mrs. Langford wanted to teach me a lesson, I was going to become hers. The kind that wouldn't fit in a gradebook. The kind she'd remember for the rest of her life. And so it began, the transformation of a girl who lost everything, into a woman who would rewrite her story one calculated move at a time. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud. Sometimes, it begins in silence. And that silence was about to become deafening. The secret behind the smile. The world didn't end that day, it just got quieter. Colder. I stopped showing up early for class. I stopped raising my hand. I walked through the hallways like a ghost wearing the shell of who I used to be. But underneath, I was listening. Watching. Waiting. Every fake smile, every whisper Mrs. Langford shared with her favorite students, every time she looked at me like I was invisible, I memorized it all. Because that's how revenge begins. Not with rage, but with observation. One evening, I returned to school to collect my old notebooks. The building was empty except for the sound of a janitor's vacuum humming in the distance. I passed by Mrs. Langford's classroom, the door was slightly open. Inside, she was sitting at her desk, lit by the faint orange glow of a desk lamp. Her face was calm, almost peaceful, until I saw what she was holding. My essay. The one she failed me on. But this version was different. The pages were marked up with her handwriting, not notes about grammar or style, but lines I hadn't written. Entire paragraphs changed. My words had been altered. And then it hit me, she had tampered with my submission. She had rewritten parts of my essay after grading it, just to justify the failing mark. I froze in the doorway, trying to process what I was seeing. The woman I once admired had rewritten my truth into failure. I took a silent step back, heart pounding, afraid she'd see me. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. Her eyes lifted just enough to catch a reflection in the window. Ava, she said softly, turning toward the door. I ran. Down the hallway, past the lockers, until the cold night air slapped my face. I didn't stop until I reached the old oak tree behind the gym, my secret hiding spot since freshman year. I sat beneath it, trembling, my breath sharp and angry. That night, something inside me finally broke free from fear. If she could twist the truth, then I could expose it. I started digging. I began visiting the teacher's office on weekends under the pretext of returning books. I noted down her schedule, her habits, who she met, what she printed. I even found out her login password by accident. She used her dog's name, Muffin, for everything. And then came the discovery that changed everything, an email thread between Mrs. Langford and the college admissions director. She had written a confidential note advising against my scholarship recommendation, citing academic dishonesty. She didn't just fail me. She blacklisted me. My vision blurred as I stared at the screen. My hands were shaking, but my heart was steady. She had taken my future from me, all because I had once seen something I wasn't supposed to. Months earlier, I'd caught her and the principal, Mr. Becker, in a situation that could have destroyed both their careers. I'd stayed silent. But she hadn't forgotten. She couldn't risk me talking. So she buried me first. That night, under the same oak tree, I made a promise to myself. If she wanted silence, I'd give her noise. If she wanted power, I'd take it back, one truth at a time. And as the cold wind swept through the empty schoolyard, I whispered my plan to the stars. I'm going to make her wish she never taught me anything. Because now, the lesson was mine to give. And the first chapter of her downfall had just begun. The perfect setup. Revenge needs choreography. It's not enough to have the truth, you have to place it where it can no longer be ignored, where it will hum in the air until everyone inhales it. I learned to think like a director, frame the scene, cue the lights, pick the moment when the world is watching. I started by building a quiet team, not a posse of criminals, but ordinary people with small skills and bigger courage. There was Ethan, the tech club president who could read server logs like poetry. There was Maya, who worked at the local paper and still remembered the way I tutored her younger brother. There was Lucas, a theater kid who knew how to control a crowd without ever seeming to try. They didn't join for drama, they joined because they believed in fairness. Because they had seen my fall and remembered the girl who used to smile in the library. We worked like clockmakers, patient and precise. Ethan taught me how to retrieve deleted files from the school server without leaving fingerprints in places that mattered. He showed me how printers kept ghosts, cached versions of documents that teachers never thought to erase. One rainy Saturday, huddled over an old laptop in the back of the tech lab, we pulled up a dozen versions of my essay stamped with Mrs. Langford's name. The differences between my original words and the altered pages were like bruises, deliberate edits that transformed nuance into accusation. But I needed more than paper. I needed motive. I needed proof that the sabotage wasn't scholarly nitpicking but personal, intentional, a pattern. Maya dug through past columns and found a history of complaints quietly buried by administration. Lucas found yearbook photos that, when aligned with staff events, painted a quiet alliance between Mrs. Langford and the principal. Ethan extracted an email trail that traced the confidential note to Mr. Becker's inbox, typed and sent with his signature approving the blacklist. The more we found, the colder I became. Each piece stitched together a portrait of a woman who had decided my story would not continue. Each discovery tightened the thread of my plan until it felt less like revenge and more like justice finding its voice. Then came the logistics, where to present it so no one could sweep it away. Awards night, Cedar Valley's annual academic awards, was perfect. Parents, local reporters, scholarship committees, and the college liaison would all be in one place. A stage, a presentation screen, a packed house. The kind of event where reputations are polished and promises are made. The kind of event where one carefully timed reveal could crack everything open. We rehearsed like conspirators. Lucas mapped the auditorium lights and sound cues. Ethan practiced the upload sequence until the process became second nature. Maya called in a favor, a freelance photographer who agreed to sit near the back and stream what happened. I wrote a short statement, not long, because long speeches drown in sentiment, but sharp, precise, and impossible to dismiss. I framed the moment not as vendetta but as exposure. Here is the truth, here is the evidence. Night arrived like a held breath. The auditorium smelled of perfume and polished wood, of pride and expectation. Parents clapped for names announced under warm spotlights. I sat in the third row, the weight of 1,000 small humiliations sitting in my lap like a stone. Mrs. Langford smiled from the stage, luminous under the lights, the kind of smile that had ended my future. Mr. Becker watched from the wings, his expression a mask of paternal pride. Behind the curtains, Ethan tapped his tablet. The slide deck was loaded. The files were synced to the projector. Lucas gave me a look that said everything we had rehearsed. When I stood, he would hand me the microphone. When I spoke, the lights would shift. When I clicked, the world would see what I had found. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, painting it with fury, with triumph, with the long, slow dismantling of a woman who thought she could rewrite other people's stories. But the real moment was smaller, sharper, just me, a microphone, and the soft thud of my own pulse. I stood. The auditorium quieted, a sea of faces forming a single audience for whatever I was about to be. My hand closed around the microphone like a promise. I could feel Mrs. Langford's stare slice the air between us. For a second, I almost heard the old voice in my head that used to believe in kindness and grades and fair play. Then that voice went quiet, and the other one rose up, steady, stripped of pity. I raised the remote. On the tablet, the file waited, a single folder labeled with my name and the word truth. My finger hovered over the button that would beam the evidence across the auditorium: emails, altered essays, photos, the admission blacklist, into the light where it could not be hidden. Outside, the night held its breath with me. Inside, 1,000 eyes leaned forward, waiting for a girl who had once been silenced to speak. I pressed down. And the screen stayed dark. When silence spoke louder. For a few seconds, the world was nothing but darkness and heartbeat. The projector didn't light up. The sound system gave a hollow pop. My stomach twisted, the kind of cold fear that crawls up your spine when everything you've built threatens to collapse in front of you. Mrs. Langford's voice cut through the silence like polished glass. "Is there a problem, Ava?" The crowd chuckled politely, unaware that the night was supposed to turn their laughter into ashes. I froze, then looked toward the back of the auditorium. Ethan was already on his feet, fingers flying across his tablet, his face pale under the stage lights. Lucas whispered something into the headset. The lights flickered once. Twice. And then, boom. The screen exploded to life. The crowd gasped as my essay appeared, the version she had submitted, crimson with her corrections. Then, side by side, my original file, time-stamped, unedited, my words restored. Every line she had changed was highlighted in yellow, glowing like a wound reopened. A hush spread through the auditorium. The whispers started like insects in summer, soft, confused, and then louder. "What is this? Wait, are those the same papers? Why would she?" I could feel Mrs. Langford's smile tremble, but she forced it back into place. She stepped toward me, her heels echoing like a countdown. "This is slander," she said calmly, into the microphone, though her voice had lost its balance. "You hacked private files." Her sentence died halfway, because Ethan clicked again. Emails flooded the screen. One from Mrs. Langford to the college board: "Ava Monroe cannot be trusted. I have reason to believe she plagiarized." Another to the principal: "You owe me this favor, Becker." I handled the problem for both of us. And then the final one, her worst mistake, a draft she'd never deleted, addressed to a friend: "She caught me once. She won't catch me again. Not after this." Gasps turned into murmurs. Then outrage. The college liaison sitting in the front row stood up, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. Cameras began flashing. Phones came up, recording. The entire room, parents, students, teachers, watched as Mrs. Langford's reputation fractured in real time. She tried to speak again, but her voice cracked. This can't." I stepped forward. My voice didn't tremble this time. "You taught me to write the truth," I said, each word landing like a slow heartbeat. "So I did." The crowd erupted, some cheering, some whispering. The principal looked like someone had drained the color from his world. I saw him glance toward the exits, as if he could still run from the wreckage. But it wasn't over. Maya's contact, the freelance journalist, had already uploaded everything live. The stream was broadcasting to the town's local news page. The story was no longer mine to hold, it belonged to everyone watching. For a moment, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt still. Like standing on the edge of something vast, not knowing if it's freedom or fallout. Mrs. Langford's eyes found mine, raw, terrified, human. And in that moment, I saw not a villain, but a woman stripped of her armor. She had built her power on perception, and I had taken that away. When the lights dimmed and security escorted them both, her and the principal, offstage, the crowd didn't look at me like a student anymore. They looked at me like someone who had broken the rules and rewritten them at once. I didn't smile. I didn't bow. I just walked off that stage, my heartbeat finally matching the rhythm of the truth. But stories like this never end cleanly. Justice comes with echoes, and the world always asks for a price. The next morning, when I opened my phone, a dozen headlines glared back at me. Teacher scandal exposed by student. Small-town high school in turmoil. And one more, the one that made my chest tighten. Ava Monroe, the girl who brought down her mentor. I had one. But something inside whispered, at what cost? Because when the world finally listens to your story, it doesn't stop talking about it. And I hadn't yet realized, the lesson wasn't over. It was about to turn on me. The lesson I never wanted to teach. The morning after felt like the end of a storm, calm, but hollow. The kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, it means aftermath. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts. Emails. News requests. My name had become something people passed around like a rumor wrapped in admiration. The girl who exposed her teacher. Everyone wanted a quote. A comment. A soundbite of revenge. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone standing in the ruins of what used to be her life, mine, and hers. Mrs. Langford resigned that week. Mr. Becker retired early. The school released a polished statement about misconduct under review. But what statements can't say is what happens afterward, the invisible consequences that don't fit in headlines. Her family left town. Her house was put up for sale. And one afternoon, when I passed the staff parking lot, I saw her car, the same blue sedan I'd once watched her arrive in, graceful and confident, sitting alone, covered in leaves, abandoned. And for a moment, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. Because I had taken her power, yes. But in doing so, I had lost the last piece of innocence I'd been holding on to. That night, I went back to the oak tree behind the gym, the one that had heard every secret version of me. I sat beneath it and looked up at the sky that used to feel too big for my small-town dreams. I thought about how all of this had started, one grade, one betrayal, one wound that turned into a war. And I asked myself a question I didn't expect to ask. Did I really win? Revenge isn't what people think it is. It's not fire, it's gravity. It pulls you deeper, heavier, until you're not sure if you're still fighting or if you've just become part of the fall. But still, I couldn't regret it. Because what I did wasn't just revenge. It was truth finding a way out, even if it had to shatter something on the way. Weeks passed. The scandal faded into whispers. The town found new stories to gossip about. And I quietly reapplied for the same scholarship that had once been taken from me. This time, the committee reached out directly, they'd reviewed my case. The evidence I exposed had reopened everything. A month later, an envelope arrived, thick, embossed, official. Congratulations, Ava Monroe, you've been selected for the Westfield Honors Scholarship. I sat on my bed, the letter trembling in my hands. I should have screamed, cried, called my parents. But instead, I just exhaled. A long, slow breath that felt like closing a circle. Before I left for college, I received one more message from an unknown number. No name. No signature. Just one line. Sometimes, lessons don't come from books. You taught me mine. I didn't need to ask who it was from. Mrs. Langford. And for the first time, I didn't feel hate. I felt something softer, understanding, maybe. The kind that doesn't erase the past, but acknowledges it existed. I typed a reply. Only 4 words. I learned mine too. Then I turned off my phone, packed my bags, and left Cedar Valley behind. As the bus pulled away, I looked out the window, at the school that once defined me, at the ghosts of every lesson that hurt, and at the girl I used to be, still standing under that oak tree. I realized something powerful that day. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. And as the highway opened ahead of me, sunlight spilling across the horizon, I whispered to myself one final truth. She failed me on purpose. But in doing so, she gave me mine. My purpose.